For 40 years, no woman in Umueze had carried a child to term. The pregnancies came and went like the rains, arriving with hope and leaving with nothing. Women miscarried in their 3rd month, their 5th, sometimes their 8th, so close to the end that the grief was almost unbearable. Those who were assured they would deliver twins did not even get one. Some stopped trying, some left the village entirely, convinced that the land itself was cursed. The ones who stayed learned to hold their joy loosely whenever a pregnancy was announced, because they had been disappointed too many times to celebrate before the child was actually in the world breathing. The elders consulted every oracle within reach. They made sacrifices at the shrines. They changed the direction of the rituals, increased the offerings, brought in priests from neighboring towns who charged heavily and delivered nothing. The herbalists prepared medicines that women drank faithfully for months without result. Every explanation was offered, and none of them held. The village continued to shrink as young couples left and the old ones stopped expecting grandchildren. What nobody connected it to was the river. Omimi had been the goddess of the Eze River since before the oldest person in the village could remember. The elders knew her name the way they knew the names of things that were respected from a distance. She was acknowledged at planting season, appeased at harvest, and largely left alone in between. The river was clean, and the fish were plentiful, and the water never dried even in the hardest harmattan, so people assumed the goddess was satisfied. They had stopped asking whether she was. What had happened was simple, and also not simple. 40 years ago, a group of young men from Umueze had gone to the river at night for reasons that had nothing to do with worship. They were drunk and loud, and one of them, in a moment of recklessness that he would spend the rest of his life unable to explain, desecrated the sacred stone at the river's edge, the one that marked the boundary between the human world and Omimi's. He urinated on it. His friends laughed. They went home and slept, and woke up the next morning as if nothing had happened. Omimi had seen everything. She did not react immediately. That was the nature of ancient things. They did not rush. They waited until the moment was right, and then they acted completely. Her response was the cause, quiet and total. No child born of the woman of Umueze would survive her womb. The village would feel the emptiness she had been made to feel. It would feel it until someone acknowledged what had been done. But Omimi was not only a goddess, she was also a woman in the way that water is both still and moving at the same time. She had desires the same way she had power. And the curse did not stop her from walking among the people she had punished. She came out of the river in human form on certain nights, drawn by something she did not always name, and she went to the men who caught her attention. She did not force herself on anyone. She came with a presence that was difficult to refuse, a beauty that operated below the level of thought, something felt in the chest before the mind had time to question it. The children born from those unions were hers, and she took them back to the water before anyone could ask questions. It was not love. It was something older than love, and less careful. For years this arrangement continued, and nobody in Umueze understood it. Men occasionally spoke of strange dreams near the river. Wives noticed their husbands sometimes came home from night fishing with a quietness they could not explain. But nothing was ever confirmed and nothing was ever confronted, because some things in a village are understood without being said. Then, she saw Emeka. He was 31, a farmer who worked the land his father had left him with the kind of seriousness that came from genuinely loving what you did. He was not the most handsome man in Umueze. He was not the loudest or the most ambitious. He had a stillness about him that was unusual in a young man, the kind of stillness that came from being comfortable with himself. He had never married because he had not yet met someone whose company felt necessary to him. He was not looking. My people, Omimi, a whole river goddess, came to him one night near the river. She appeared in the form she always used among humans, a tall, beautiful woman. She had never been questioned before. Men saw her, and something in them simply moved toward her. Emeka looked at her for a long moment, and then asked her who she was, and what she was doing alone at the river at that hour. She told him her name. Not her human name. her real one. He did not run. He did not fall to his knees either. He stood where he was and regarded her with the same expression he gave things he was thinking carefully about. Omimi asked him to come with her beyond the surface of the river, and Emeka willingly declined. She asked him why. He said he did not have a reason she would find satisfying. He simply knew that what she was offering was not the thing he wanted. He was a simple man that was not moved or swayed by just words of women, and certainly not this goddess of a woman. Omimi had not been refused before. She stood at the river bank for a long time after he walked away, and the feeling that settled in her chest was one she had no reference point for. It was not anger exactly, though anger came later. It was something more disorienting than anger. It was the feeling of being seen and still turned away. She had been worshipped and feared and desired, but she had never been simply regarded and declined by a man who meant no disrespect by it. Emeka had not been rude. He had not been afraid. He had simply said no and walked home to sleep. She came back at different hours. She appeared near his farm in the early morning. She appeared at the village market. She appeared in front of him in the middle, his path home, all to sway him to like her. He was not unkind. He spoke to her when she appeared. He spoke to her as though she has been her friend long before time. This made her feel frustrating and confused. Slowly, something other than frustrating started to develop with her. If you are still here, make sure you have subscribed. Let's continue, my people. What happened to Omimi over those months was not something she had planned for. She had come back to Emeka out of pride initially. The refusal had wounded something in her, and she wanted to correct it. But the more time she spent near him, the more something shifted in what she was feeling. He talked to her without performance. He asked her questions nobody had ever thought to ask her. One evening near the river, he asked her if she was lonely, and the question was so unexpected that she did not answer for a full minute. When she finally spoke, she told him the truth about who she really is and why she came to him in the first place. She told him no man had ever rejected to go with her underneath the river before, and he was the very first one. That night, she went back into the river that night and stayed for 3 days. In the silence of the water, she examined what had been growing in her, and she recognized it reluctantly. She had fallen in love with a man who had refused her, not because he was trying to prove something, not because he was playing a game, but because he was genuinely not moved by the things that moved other men. That quality, the very thing that had wounded her, was the thing she had come to need most. On the 4th day, she went to the sacred stone at the river's edge, and she lifted the curse. She did not do it as a bargain. She did not announce it. She simply undid what she had done because she understood now what it meant to be present and unseen, to offer something and have it declined. And she could no longer hold the village responsible for what one careless young man had done 40 years ago. She released it the way you release a breath you have been holding too long. The following year, 11 women in Umueze carried their pregnancies to term. The village did not know what had changed. They went back to the shrines and thanked the gods collectively, assuming that something in their prayers had finally landed. The elders said the land had been cleansed. Nobody thought to look at the river. Omimi went back to Emeka one more time, this time to his compound. Emeka welcomed her and they started to chat from afternoon till evening. She told her how she has developed feelings for him, for being the kind of man she never expected to meet. He also told her he had started feeling same but on one condition: if they would live on land. Omimi was not even hesitant and agreed. She took a human name instead of Omimi. She went by Adanna, and she learned the weight of ordinary days. She learned what it meant to wake up tired, and to eat when hungry, and to feel the harmattan on skin that could no longer dismiss it. She helped on the farm. She learned to cook things she had only ever watched humans cook from the water. She became, slowly and imperfectly, someone whose feet were fully on the ground. The river ran clean as it always had. The fish remained plentiful. The sacred stone stood at the bank undisturbed. And in Umueze, children were born and survived, and grew up in a village that had forgotten what abundance felt like and was learning it again, one birth at a time. Nobody knew what had changed, only the river knew, and the river kept its own counsel.